Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Financial District, a production of the Museum of Chinese in America, or MOCA. My name is James Hu, and a member of the MOCA board. During my career as an M&A lawyer, I had the privilege of talking to the leading minds of the business world. In this podcast, we will share with you their insights, experiences, and strategies. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dave Liu, founder of Hyphen Capital, to the podcast. Dave has built a remarkable career across technology, business, and investing. And along the way, he has been a strong advocate for Asian American founders and entrepreneurs. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me, James.
To start with, we're in a moment where AI is dominating the conversation. Do you think we are at the beginning of a true paradigm shift? And how should a tech investor think about AI?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of folks are very anxious about what is happening with AI. It's just one of the, as far as I can recall, I've been here in the Valley for like three different shifts. The first when the internet started taking over, and then the second when smartphones, were starting to be used, and now with AI, it's the kind of a third gen revolution that I've been a part of, and the other two weren't as not frightening, but the word is kind of like causing as much anxiety as this one is, and I think it's because the others weren't going to replace anyone's jobs. I think right now people are afraid for their own kind of job security, and they're uncertain because they don't know what it's evolving so quickly that they don't know what the other they don't know what to think about it. But I think the way to approach it, like any of the other two revolutions, were that these are tools that were used to make things um, easier, make lives easier, but also yes, even with the internet, there's a lot of you know things that were unknown, and now we're seeing kind of the repercussions of social media and how it's caused rifts between communities, and there's a lot of vitriol and other things, and trolls and all sorts of things that cause mental health issues because of the internet. Smartphones, addictions that people have because of smartphones, and so AI will be no different. We have to figure out how to navigate it, but I think here in the valley, it's probably different than the outside world. That we're embracing it as much as we can to understand how it might help, because we're used to these things, these waves that come. And I think for us, it's what does that look like for the day to day for people? How can we harness that to again make lives easier and better? But again, there's also the dark side of things that sometimes we build things and fast and we break things, and we don't think about the repercussions. But there will be a time where we'll see the results of that, and we're seeing some of that now with people taking their own lives because AI has driven them to do so. And so I think it's a scary time, but nothing's going to stop it. Like whether we want to or not, it's companies are going to build. And I think it's a matter of understanding how to what that next phase is going to look like for each person individually in their careers. You know, as a lawyer, like it's like how do I can if I'm an associate, I could get a lot of my work can be replaced by AI. There's a lot of legal tech that can replace it. But you can also think, well, it can also make you that much more efficient, and your billable hours will be, you can figure out a way. The pricing might be different for law firms and whatnot, but it's a matter of how can you actually take on more work, and be competitive while you're more able to use AI to kind of augment your abilities as a good lawyer.
Well said. And there's definitely this, I'll just say this maybe bifurcation between what I call AI infrastructure builder, right, and maybe the AI user.
Hmm.
And you probably kind of saw that similar pattern developing even in the internet phase, right? There were people who were building the infrastructure of internet, and then people who were using the infrastructure as use cases.
Hmm.
Have you seen kind of that kind of to say categories developing kind of in your world of investing?
Yeah, I think there are many folks who are building the for the infrastructure and the kind of the back end support for, because it's as we all know, it takes a lot of resources to use for AI to for compute. It's very resource intensive. But there are a lot of platforms and infrastructure that needs to be built to whether it be there's one thing to build a tool that helps folks, another to actually make sure that it can run properly, and it's like it's easy enough to use. So you see things like a lot of the things that people don't see behind the scenes whether it be a chip company or the software behind it, or the energy that's being used. Like there's all sorts of startups I'm seeing around that honestly tend to feel like they're bigger bets because at scale they're much bigger. To create a scale of a ChatGPT or Perplexity or something like that, that requires a lot of capital. It's very
Yeah.
resource intensive. It's just going to be whether it be marketing or whatnot. Those folks are in another league of capital raising and burning. When you are raising tens of billions of dollars and you're burning tens of $1 billion, if not more, for compute, that's untenable for most startups to go after. But if you're, building something that can be that everyone needs across the platforms and infrastructure to actually use the AI, that seems to be a lot more sustainable and more defensible as a business. Because people are fickle. I even, I use ChatGPT, but then I can go to Gemini, then I can go to, Claude. Switching costs are, other than memory and other things, it's, people are still trying different things. Yes, ChatGPT has the most kind of brand recognition, but a lot of the folks who are more savvy AI users aren't, are using, Claude and other and Gemini Deep Research and others too, because each has its own strengths. So, but again, they can all survive because they have so much capital raised.
Yeah, makes sense. Beyond AI, what are some of the under the radar areas of tech that you think are ripe for disruption, but aren't yet getting enough attention, perhaps?
Well, we know that defense tech has been extremely, valuable lately, and especially given like how nationalistic all these countries are becoming, and the world is went from globalized to now everyone kind of is internally looking at themselves and their needs for defense. A lot of defense tech companies are doing quite well, and then in every I think vertical niche AI plays are probably the strongest right now because whether it be in radiology and med tech, how do you streamline using AI to actually create more productivity for a radiologist or for a dentist or for whatever it might be. And then for legal tech, there's so many folks who are trying to come out with solutions to the rote mundane work that a lot of kind of associates have to do. A lot of it can be replaced. A lot of kind of the template stuff that you don't want to, a lot of folks don't want to pay for. There's uh there's a lot of options in that area as well. But I think what it comes down to is there's just so many and it's so easy to build some of these if there's just wrappers around some of these LLMs. It becomes very hard to differentiate because the barrier to entry is so low that a lot of folks are able to build quickly, and so it can become very expensive if there are 20 players going after the same kind of solution, and then user research, and there's like a number of them, and the one who's most capitalized may be the one that wins, but it might not, because maybe the other one has really smart technology background that can actually win. So it can become precarious in terms of how to pick these companies. Um, but then there are other companies that are kind of like on the bleeding edge of one of these companies I invested in was these are kind of PhDs in machine learning and focusing on things like how to create more emotion and out of an AI avatar. So right now, a lot of the stuff is kind of pre-recorded, but eventually imagine a world where you go to customer support, like a McDonald's, and you have actually instead of having a person take your order, you already have kind of a touch screen. But that also for some older people takes forever. But if you just had an AI interface that looked like that was a human, like an AI avatar, but actually can respond in real time with facial expressions, and it might feel more natural. Those are things that are kind of, like I said, an infrastructure platform play that it can be used across all different, it can be used for customer support. It can be used for, people who are fans and followers of, you know, Djokovic or Federer or whoever. It's like, oh, I want to talk to Roger Federer. It's like, oh, there's an AI avatar that actually responds, like he was actually talking to you. But I think you have to think, what does the world look like, 5, 10 years from now, and what technologies are going to be required to get there? Um, you know, the other thing I spoke about was energy depletion and resources. Like, okay, so how are data centers going to find where they on the grid they can actually build without, sucking dry a whole community of their electricity on the grid? So I think when you think about what does it look like 5, 10 years now from now when so much compute is being used, water, energy, and then how people are interacting with AI, what does that look like? What will be needed? Um, Versus kind of a lot of folks now are kind of chasing the things that are more obvious. It's like, oh, this is a AI that can help you write books. Okay, well, there's 15 of those. How do you know which one's better? There's no defensibility and or moat between those.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's the distinction of the lower hanging fruits
Yeah,
and perhaps what are the biggest problem, right, that you can solve, which
yeah,
you portend to have the biggest opportunities.
yeah. That's right.
Uh, Thanks for touching on kind of some of the themes kind of behind some of the newly emerged companies. And you mentioned maybe the defense tech is one of the areas, and it feels like that has a lot to do with global macroeconomic, right, geopolitical factors. How do you see kind of some of these factors, supply chain disruption dynamics, capital flows? How do they shape maybe future startup opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed so much. I mean, before so many U.S. Firms were investing in China, and now they can't invest in China. And then there are a lot of Chinese investors who want to invest in the U.S. markets, and they can't either. So, you know, a lot of folks are, in terms of kind of fundraising, it's been tricky for a lot of folks. And then in terms of even hiring or investing, their kind of hands are tied because they have to worry about, what the political risk is. Is there kind of CFIUS risks or other things that the government can kind of come after you for. And then the flip side, it's like, well, if they're, if the markets open up more for kind of more IPOs because interest rates come down or whatever the reason might be, that also changes how many people are able to raise or how many exits there are. Right now, the last 4 years or so, it's been tight on kind of liquidity because of IPOs kind of shrinking. And so I think, time will tell how the next several years looks, but, given the way the economy is, inflation is probably going the direction we're going in and the recession we're heading into, um, I think, those are the tough times that companies like Uber and Instacart and others came out of, Airbnb, because they had to survive and they had to come up with ideas that were kind of game changers. And so I think we'll see companies like that come out of this as well. Um, but yeah, the geopolitical and macro, I think they're scary for some folks, but none of this ever scares founders because they're going to build no matter what because their time horizon is very different. If you're starting something now, you're not looking for an exit for another like 10 years. So you'll build in spite of all the things that are happening around you.
Yeah, well said. Maybe switching gears a little to talk about venture capital more specifically.
Mhm.
Uh, how has venture capital investing changed since you started your career?
Well, I started in tech back in like 99, the late 90s. And, I think back then the valuations were much smaller. The exits weren't as, nearly as big. People weren't raising as much money. Ironically, now back then the cost of starting a company was so much higher. You had to buy servers and then eventually you could host servers. Now it's just all in the cloud. Before you had to pay for, a ton of engineers to help you program and, it was very expensive. And now you have, coding, AI help for coding and debugging and other things. And so you can run a company a lot leaner and cheaper. And so a friend of mine, Henry Shi, he's got put together a list, Lean AI leaderboard. And essentially, these are companies that have raised very little money with very few employees, but they're generating tens of millions of dollars in ARR already. And a lot of that is because you don't have to raise very much money to get going now. I mean, compute you have to pay for, but that's a lot cheaper relative to human capital. And so with a small team of 4 or 5, you can be making $100 million. And so the idea is that there might be a point where there's a single solo entrepreneur that's using AI to build and scaling his own company, his or her own company to $1 billion in revenue. And it's, it seems crazy, but it's, people are proving it already. Um, you know, and it's only a matter of time before these things get smarter, and a lot of it can be done through AI. So I think people get scared about what's about their job security, but I think if they look at it and embrace the creativity side of things and being able to manage AI agents and how you can actually leverage AI for yourself, you could build a whole business yourself and not need to have a job because AI will allow you to do that. It's a matter of who's actually going to take the risk and try it out or learn and embrace it versus being afraid of it.
Yeah, I certainly think it is not a game of elimination. It is actually a game of creation, right? You are now
Yes,
freeing
the pie's
people's
bigger. Yeah,
mind and maybe times up
yep,
for different things that until this day, maybe people either did not have the resource
yep,
nor the bandwidth to deal with.
yeah. And I've seen someone say this, if you are someone who uh, their job is to take orders and you just listen to other people tell you what to do before you do anything, then you're probably in trouble. If you are someone who actually it has agency and is knows what they want to build or has kind of ideas and a vision and creativity, those people will thrive. So it's kind of like who takes orders versus who's willing to give orders is going to determine who's going to succeed in this.
Makes a little sense. Uh, what do you think make for a healthy and productive relationship between a founder and investor, especially from your perspective as an
Yeah.
investor?
I mean, I think first and foremost is trust and transparency. If you don't have a relationship where there's trust, and you can't be honest with each other with feedback, with kind of advice, input, and updates, because you're afraid of judgment or whatever kind of punishment you might receive or you think you might receive. I think that can lead to a very unhealthy relationship. I think someone who's engaged and builds trust and is vulnerable, that shows that there is kind of a level of a relationship there that you can be open. And I think you need to have an open relationship. Otherwise, you can't be that helpful. If half the stuff you're getting is filtered, the information you're getting is filtered, you can't really do much with that. So I think it's really important to be able to kind of trust and be transparent with your founders and vice versa with your investors.
Yeah, it's interesting that I also observed over the years that building trust is not just a matter of showing confidence or right
Yeah.
showing the strength. It is also showing,
Or
hey,
weakness.
there
Yeah.
might be something I need help with.
Yep. Yep. 100% showing weakness. And, you know, for a lot of Asian Americans, that's not something that we grow up doing, right? We're not supposed to show that our flaws or weaknesses or that we have made mistakes, and so we tend to hide that or filter it because we only want to show the best things. Because growing up, we know our parents would scold us if you did something wrong or you made a mistake or whatnot. So I think that we need to break out of that mentality and be able to kind of share openly when we have made mistakes or we need help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of self-awareness and strength that you actually acknowledge that you need the help. And I think you have to reframe that in your own mind.
Yeah, that's well said. Um, you focus on early stage investing. What do you think are the key differences in the mindset or skill sets needed compared to what I call maybe a growth stage
Mm.
venture?
Yeah, I mean, growth is completely different because you've already got product market fit. You have traction. You have resources. You can hire, people who are experienced in that. Founding a company early stage, you can't because a lot of times these are things that haven't been done before. If you're building something brand new, it's a lot more about grit and kind of trying to be okay with uncertainty. When you invest in a growth stage company, you basically just have a Excel model you can plug in the numbers into and see if putting in more cash will help the business grow to a point where it needs to grow. When it's early stage, there is no model. Like there's no revenue probably. A lot of it is very ambiguous, and people have to be willing to be okay with ambiguity and uncertainty because at that stage nobody knows if it's even going to work because it's an idea. So it's much harder to take a bet at that point on an idea. A lot of it is based on the founder and what they've done in the past, the kind of what grit they've shown in the past, what their experience is, the reason for wanting to build a solution. Is it personal? Is it something that they dealt with in themselves? And so for me, I think it's very much identifying like the founders and the right founders to take the bets on, versus kind of at growth stage, you kind of have an idea of what they're doing already, and you're seeing, hey, can this scale if I give it more fuel to the fire? And so very different. One is taking a bet on something that's completely unknown. The other is betting on something that's pretty known, and it's a belief on whether you think it would can continue to grow the same pace.
Yeah, one can say the early stage is building the structure, and perhaps the growth stage is to scale up the structure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so narrowing down to maybe Hyphen Capital a little bit, I know Hyphen Capital is as much a network as it is a fund.
Mhm.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Asian American founder circle you created?
Yeah. So when I came to Silicon Valley in '99, I there wasn't, I started when I first started my company, my first company around '05. There are a lot of Asian Americans here in Silicon Valley, but as in terms of founders, there was no real community. There was community for Indian founders from India, Chinese founders from China, women founders, Black founders, Hispanic founders, but for Asian Americans, because we're so fragmented, there wasn't that community, and so it wasn't like going to college where you can go join like CSA or like there's, Chinese Students Edition or KSA or whatever it might be. So I pulled together a group of friends for dinner who were all founders. It was just 8 of us. And that I saw because without community you cannot, or network, you cannot succeed. I firmly believe that you need to have a network to succeed, because that's who introduces you to potential investors, potential customers, potential hires, um, all sorts of people you need to help you grow. And you know, I grew that group from 8 founders to about 200 founders, pre-pandemic, and now, 400 founders. It was very much a seeing the dynamic of that community helping one another out with advice or angel investing each other or supporting each other. It made a big difference, and I think that's why, I started Hyphen, because I saw how the community could actually. I want to codify what I was seeing in the community that I built into a way that we actually you put money into it and help when, like, the companies out during COVID when they needed support, when they were struggling to raise capital. And so, what started off as an idea to help 2 or 3 founders out with a few $100,000 checks by pooling together and syndicating investments from the community. I ended up writing an essay that got shared publicly, and we ended up growing it to, like, 1,000 investors who invested $30 million in these 100 plus Asian founded companies, Asian American founded companies. And so for me, it very much is showing the power of the network to be able to support beyond just kind of moral support. It was actually financial support, and we've already had multiple outcomes from that, and companies that have been acquired, and so it just goes to show, it's like, if you always live life thinking you have to ask permission for something, you won't get it. But if you take it yourself, you can get it. So I think for me, it was very eye opening to just go after it like that.
Great. And if we can focus on your personal career journey a little bit, growing up, what type of experiences shape the way you think about entrepreneurship and opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, my dad was a chemical engineer. My mom, she worked for someone for, a freight forwarding company for years, for decades, and then she decided to start her own company. And so seeing how my mom, I would go in with her to New York, take the train to Wall Street, and she had an office right on Wall Street. And I thought I would help her out at the office. And I thought, wow, I I really saw how she was calling the shots, and it was any any risk she took, was on her, but also any reward she took was on her. So I think, my friend, Mike Lee, who started Under Armour, I just interviewed him, and he said when he started the company, he knew he wanted to start a company because he just didn't like having a boss. So I think that's a big, tell. If you can't have a boss, or you're not happy having a boss, that means you're probably suited for starting your own thing. And so that was my mom. She was like, basically, I'm doing all this work for other people. I should do it for myself, and I'm reap the rewards too. So for me, it was seeing my mom and seeing how she did that. Um, and she knew she could do it. She had the confidence because she's like, I've done this for other people. Why should I be able to do it, for myself? That's when I realized I saw that I wanted to do that. And also, I think growing up in my household, my parents never forced me to want to become a doctor or a lawyer. I mean, I told them I wanted to do business, and they were fine with that. But I think they let me kind of be entrepreneurial in my own way, like, growing up, and trying different things. And so I think that experimentation, and tinkering, that's something that I always had in me. So um, both the confidence or blind arrogance of being, my own boss, and then also loving to tinker. That over the years, as I worked, I gained the skills of. I learned how to do Photoshop and design on my own. I tried to code on my own. I tried to, you know, go and explore, like, different revenue streams and things that I could tinker with on my own. Like, and so I think I took everything I learned and decided, oh, I want to do this myself now. And so I think at home, my mom and dad fostered that kind of culture of being able to go on your own, even though my mom would always say, "Oh, when are you just going to get a job at Google?" So she didn't, even though she was an entrepreneur, she wanted me to not do that, and she wanted me to go get a safe job, of course. So
Yeah, that's a great topic. How do you think about, as a young person, I'll just say graduating from college,
yeah,
deciding whether to go into a company like Microsoft, or maybe starting his or her own shop?
yeah. The funny thing is, when I was 30 and I started my first company, I wish I had started it sooner, like earlier, and not gone through that. But it's like, in hindsight, it's like people who say, "Oh, you don't need a college degree anymore," who have a college degree. I'm like, well, I'm not going to listen to you because you already have a college degree. And so for me, it was okay. Well, there were things that I learned working at Yahoo and eBay and Apple that gave me the skill sets to actually. Some people argue, why did you go to Stanford Business School? It's so expensive. But, like, well, that network actually opened doors for me to raise money, raise capital when I needed it. So without that, I wouldn't have had that. But everything happens for a reason. I think I learned even my first company, the idea came out of what I learned from eBay about affiliate marketing and generating revenue from affiliates. I learned something from there that kind of gave me ideas. So I think when you can start straight out of school, but you won't have, some of the skill sets you might have, but you will also, there'll be a lot of things that you're missing, but you also don't know you don't know what you don't know. So you're kind of bold and brash in many ways. But then when you come into difficult situations where you haven't dealt with people management or other things before, you realize that you could have benefited from some of that. It's kind of like going to the NBA straight out of high school versus playing a few years in college. You kind of learn how to manage some of the emotions, some of the dealing with coaches and other things that you don't learn when you just get thrown straight from high school to the NBA. There's a lot of maturing that has to happen, and so yes, a lot of if I came out of school now, I probably would have had the brashness to try to start my own thing, but I probably learned quickly how hard it was. And if I'd gone to learn even a few years, like working at Google or Microsoft or something, or even at a startup, a late stage, I would say growth stage startup because it's much more the infrastructure is there. If you go straight into a startup that's people who don't know what they're doing, also you're blind leading the blind, and you won't learn much from there because it's just chaos. But I think there's something to be said about learning from places that have places you want to get to. Like if you go to a stage B, C, Series B, Series C company, you see what a company mature looks like and how like it operates, and you know what you want to grow your company into, and the things you can pick and choose what you like about that. You can build into your own culture. But if you've never experienced that before, you're basically making it up as you go along, and that tends to be messier. So, look, I know people are not even going to college anymore. I funded people who dropped out of Stanford to start companies, and they've done well. But you know, I I would think more often than not those don't work out than the ones that do.
Yeah, and it tends to be those that did work out that gets
Hear the
reported, and
stories. Yeah,
therefore
yeah,
there's outsized maybe perception that
yep.
that would be the way.
Yeah, there's bias for sure.
Yeah, yeah, great. And in addition to investing, you also got involved in the production of the Emmy-winning documentary 38 at the Gate. Can you tell us your experience in producing that?
Yeah, so it was 38 at the Garden, Madison Square
38 at
Garden.
the Garden, sorry.
Yeah, this is okay. And yeah, that was amazing for me because I grew up a Knicks fan in New Jersey, and my dad was a Knicks fan, and so I seeing a Ivy League Taiwanese American kid that like was taking over the NBA. It was incredible for me and on the New York Knicks of no less. And so I I was just watching that for me was I flew out to New York from San Francisco to watch some of these games, and I followed Jeremy when he was at Harvard and he played out here in California. And I just knew that when my friends reached out and they said they needed they were looking for help producing this documentary on Jeremy 10 years later, I knew I needed to be a part of that. And so I decided to kind of help find financing for that film. We made it halfway through, it got picked up by HBO. And again, we had to make it independently because a lot of the big studios they weren't interested in the story. They thought, well, Jeremy, he was in the league for 9 years, but he wasn't, after Linsanity, it wasn't as good as he was back then. But I'm like, but you don't understand what that meant for a whole community of people, and how hard that was for him to even be in that place. It was near impossible. And so to tell that story to kids and people who weren't around when that happened and that didn't experience that, that to me is how you continue to keep a legacy going. And I think the impact continues because we have the film now that people can see what happened. And so I think I realized from that experience that storytelling is so important, and being able to tell these stories so that next future generations can benefit from them is really important. And so in this time when a lot of stories are being erased, we need to kind of make sure that we are telling these stories and that we are capturing them. And so that's why it was so important for me to tell because I get kids and parents now telling me that how you know much that film impacted them. And so yeah, I'm really proud of that. Oh,
Yeah, and I still remember the phrase coined. I guess that was Linsanity back in those days.
that's right. That's right. So, and even back then, Jeremy didn't like talking about it because, he wanted to focus on his basketball, not about him like that moment. He wanted to move on from that, and he didn't want to be focused. The focus to be on him as an Asian American player. He just wanted to play basketball and let his basketball, show, itself, prove itself. Um, But as he's gotten older, he realized how the impact he's had on people and how important it was. And so it's interesting. I heard him talk the other day. When I was at a panel or at a talk he gave, and he said it's hard when you are 23 to know like that you peaked and that the rest of your life will always be in the shadow of that moment. But you learn to embrace that you even had that moment and that you can use that. And so yeah, I think it's really hard, especially for an athlete, to know that your best days are behind you, because then how does that make you think about the rest of your life? But if you can reframe that and think how you can leverage that and make the second chapter or whatever you do even better, that's what Jeremy's doing now. So I kind of feel like that's what I feel like I want to do as well, make my second chapter more impactful for a broader audience, which is why I write and which is why I'm do the things I do.
Yeah, I think that peaking phenomenon probably happens one way or another across all professions.
I mean, yeah,
It may not be 23, right? If you're, I don't know, professional, it might be 45 or 50 at some point.
yeah.
And I think there's a book From Strength to Strength that exactly dealt with this topic.
Second arc. Yep, that's right.
The second act of, I guess, right after the successful first act.
What does that look like? Yeah. You can't dwell on your glory days. I mean, heck, I think it also was in that book that like the people who win the Nobels and the breakthroughs, they happen when they're like 18, like 19, like 20 years old. And so after that, how are you going to top your breakthrough that won you the Nobel Prize? Like you'll always be reaching for that again, and that's it's not going to happen.
Yeah, great. Maybe that's a great segue to our last question for you today, Dave. What is your one piece of advice to founders in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very hard to stand out in the world today. There's just so much noise. There's so much kind of people clamoring for attention. And I think as a founder, if you can stay true to yourself and heads down on what you're building, but also remember how important it is to have a network of people who are similar to you. That if you're a founder surrounded by a bunch of doctors or consultants, it's very lonely. You have to find a community of other founders because you drive each other. Find a community of people who inspire you to do better each day, and not give up, because there will be dark times when you feel very alone, and if you don't have that community around you, it'll only feel worse. And if you have one around you, those kind of ebbs and flows, you can ride those out because you have others who are going through similar things, and you realize that you're not alone. And I think as long as you stay committed to what you want to build, and be open to feedback and be self-aware about what's working and what's not working. The worst thing that can happen is if you're so stubborn and you think you're right, that you basically drive your own business in the ground. Allow your users and customers to tell you what they need. Be maniacal about listening to your users, because they're the ones who are going to pay for your product, and you need to be adaptable to that. Otherwise, if you are too kind of stubborn about what you're building and you refuse to listen to even your customers, then you're doomed to fail.
Great advice. Thank you, Dave, for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, James.